efficiency, what is efficient? The concept of efficiency depends upon your framework. What is efficient in a school? Having good grades, not killing your neighbor, being successful at maths, but not in literacies because it's less important, being able to learn a language, to apply the language, being able to visit another country, to have a Skype with somebody in another country. The definition of efficiency that is, manifested into tests and language tests is very, I would say, relative and often shallow. If the test is shallow, if the definition of what is efficient is shallow, then the path of learning will be shallow. That's for education. What is proof? Depending what is evidence, we tend to believe more in intersubjectivity than in objectivity. Intersubjectivity means that 10, 20, 30, 40 people agree, 50 people agree on this element. Because we have interviewed so many, we have observed so many, they agree to that. That's a strong intersubjective approval or factor. Evidence is always based on perception. Evidence may be relative to different places, different locations, different cultures, different ways of being. What is evidence? Evidence is also dependent upon the media. There are things that are not disseminated. The media filter information. There are evidences that our mind cannot understand. We reject this form of evidence. I don't know if among you there are people who have membership at Gaia.com. Gaia is the Netflix of spirituality. Gaia.com, Gaia.com. There are lots of intersubjective evidence that would blow up your mind on that site. What is evidence? I remember in 2005, I read an article on the English translation of Pravda. You know, Pravda is the Russian journal. And often on Pravda, you see very crusty things. I mean, they like to have all kinds of fancy news as well as serious political news. And so I was reading Pravda online, the English version, and then there was this story about a farmer who had large land and he was farming the land with his tractor. And every year when he was starting to work on the land, on the field to have crops, he found strange ceramics. So each time he would put the ceramics on a big place where more and more ceramics would go. He did that for 12 years. The farmer was the Ural. And at some point, he was so surprised that deeper he went in the soil, deeper were the fragments. And there were ceramics like parts curved, big ceramics curved, but they were very firm, very strong, very solid. So at some point, he said, there are like pictures, houses and cities sketched on those ceramics. So he brought a professor of archaeology from the University of Ukraine, who was one of his friends, but they came and they analyzed ceramics for datation, 100,000 years old, fabricated by humans with a technology they didn't know. Actually, with more analysis in their labs, they found the technology was not known in current humanity. It was based on fusion. And then they found that if you put all the fragments together, it would be a huge globe. Huge globe. And the globe was representing cities and channels, water channels in Ural that don't exist anymore, that were so expensive in terms of architecture and how they were done that it would cost billions of dollars nowadays. So it would be impossible to build, too expensive. And now all these representation of cities and channels were represented from the air. You had a map of Ural with its cities and channels that don't exist anymore, represented from the air. They had airplanes 120,000 years ago. My wife is an archaeologist. So when I read that, I told my wife, and she said, you never know, Pravda, datation. She analyzed that, and she said, datation sometimes is not fully correct. So I forgot that for 2 weeks. But 2 weeks after, there was front page on CNN, on the website of CNN, the same story. And the continuation of the story was that the team analyzing the ceramics of Ural at the University of Ukraine had sent all the fragments for analysis and confirmation of that datation to a university in the US. And guess which university? They sent it to the Department of Geography of UW-Madison. So the story gets more serious. And then I got some people in touch with geography and so, and then there was this article about it in the news of the UW-Madison. It came closer and closer. I don't know what you call evidence, but this was evidence. And then what? It disappeared because nobody wants to hear about something that changes their vision of reality. Disappeared. Nobody spoke about it anymore. Evidence, nobody cares. We want to keep our belief system intact. That's why Charles Peirce, the semiotician, he was defining science as what? As the fixation of beliefs. That's superb, It's the title of one of his articles at the beginning of the 20th century. Charles Peirce, the semiotician. What is science? Science is the process through which we confirm and fix our belief. Thomas Kuhn is a historian. He reviewed all the paradigmatic shifts and revolutions. He said, scientists hate revolutions. They don't like, they are like, in French you say, rond de cuir. Rond de cuir means people who want to do the same all their life. And indeed, you have some people, they do their dissertation, and then they are immovable in the little pin of research they did in their dissertation all their life, they will spend on their dissertation. That's fantastic. That's why it's so important when you reflect on your research project, do the right thing. Maybe you'll continue 30, 40 years. Civil servants who have been working on the same chair all their life, at the end, they have a thick skin on their bottom, a circle of thick skin. Pen pusher, publish or perish. So you publish anything. The importance is to publish, no? And publish in SSCI journals. The problem is they are co-opted. If you go in NSF and you are in foreign language education, there is no foreign language education community in the National Science Foundation. So you go through linguistics, but linguists won't recognize you. Or you go through engineering with languages, but the problem, they don't know you. Science has been based for so many years on complexity reduction. Think about it. There is a fantastic, now he's emeritus, a fantastic researcher on complexity in Australia. That's Noel Goff. By the way, he's a very Foucauldian guy. Foucault and Deleuze. He's a Deleuze guy. Noel Goff, Gough. I had him by email these last days, and he sent me a few of his articles, recent articles. He's working on the scientist as a cyborg, and it's very, very interesting. He's in environmental sciences. He is still chief editor of Transnational Curriculum Inquiry. But SSCI, the myth of having those hard-reaching journals is you need to be co-opted by those people of your network. So you have to start, how to say, having the same sound as these people. Meh, excuse me. You have to meh in the same direction, at least. It's more difficult to find black sheep who meh together, more difficult.
Why can't we think out of the box? The concept of efficiency depends upon one's framework. For example, in schools, how do we define efficiency? Developing programs that make students good at math but not at literacy is because they are considered of lesser importance, programs that prevent bullying and aggressing other students, that teach languages, that lead students to apply the languages, or having online conversations with friends abroad. What do tests of performance measure? On what basis do we ground the concept of proof? Nowadays, we tend to believe in intersubjective agreement rather than objectivity. Evidence is always based on perception. It may be relative to location, culture, ways of being, and the media as filters of information. There are things the mind cannot understand. They are left aside. If by chance you are a member of Gaia.com, the Netflix of spirituality, you would gather evidence that would blow your mind based on a large number of intersubjective testimonies. Here is another example. In 2005, Pravda published an article about a farmer who each year, when preparing for seeding with his tractor, was finding large vitrified ceramics on his property in Ural. He made a big pile of all of these curved ceramics for many years before looking for an expert. A professor in archaeology came from the University of Ukraine, to whom he was connected. Analysis for datation indicated that the ceramic fragments were 120,000 years old. Glued together, the ceramic fragments would constitute a giant globe, representing the region of Ural, which could be recognized from the rivers, as this is a very stable region with not much of a seismic activity. The fragments represented large cities and rich infrastructures with so many dams the current economy could not afford. The buildings were in 3D graphics with so much detail and information that in 2005 no computer could process as much information. And the cities were pictures from the sky, from a flying object, from the air. Material analysis indicated that the gloss of the ceramics was unbreakable, and it had been created with a technology we do not master yet, based on fusion. 2 weeks after, the same news appeared on the CNN website, and they added that the research team of the University of Ukraine has requested the Department of Geography of the UW-Madison to make a counter-analysis and validation, and they received the ceramic fragment. A week later, the news was published in the online news of the UW-Madison. Then, nobody spoke about it anymore. People are not interested in evidence that doesn't fit and contradicts their vision of reality. As Thomas Kuhn, the scientist of paradigmatic revolution, noted, leaping to a new model of reality is costly and does not happen incrementally. Science has been based for so many years on complexity reduction and co-optation. Scientific revolutions occur when a tipping point has been reached and created a paradigmatic crisis. Then a scientific revolution occurs. In 2020, we are right before such a scientific revolution.
Do you have any questions so far?